The Minecraft urban legend known as Null sits at an interesting crossroads between creepypasta tradition, community myth-making, and the psychological way players interpret glitches and emptiness in sandbox games. Unlike more clearly defined legends such as Herobrine, Null is less a character and more a concept, a manifestation of absence, corruption, or the void itself. This vagueness is precisely what gives Null its power. The name alone suggests non-existence, deletion, or a failure of reality, which resonates strongly in a game built entirely from data, chunks, and procedural rules. When players describe encountering Null, they rarely talk about a figure with a face or behavior. Instead, they describe worlds breaking down, chunks failing to load, entities freezing, or the game behaving as if it has lost meaning or purpose. Null is not something that hunts you, but something that erases the certainty that the game is functioning as intended. From a narrative standpoint, Null often represents the fear of the game becoming aware of its own artificiality. Minecraft is usually comforting in its logic. Blocks behave consistently, physics are predictable, and even danger follows clear rules. Null breaks this contract. Stories involving Null often describe moments where the game stops responding to the player's expectations, such as commands failing silently, the sky turning wrong, or the world becoming empty despite data still existing. This taps into a deeper unease than a monster attack, because it undermines the player's role as an agent with control. Instead of being threatened by something inside the world, the player feels threatened by the collapse of the world itself. In this sense, Null functions less like a villain and more like entropy given a name. Psychologically, Null is a classic example of pareidolia and anxiety filling in the gaps left by technical ambiguity. Early versions of Minecraft were notoriously unstable, with frequent chunk errors, missing textures, and unexplained crashes. Players encountering these issues, especially when playing alone, often attributed intent to them. The human mind is uncomfortable with randomness, particularly in immersive environments, and so it creates narratives to explain anomalies. Null becomes the story that explains why a world suddenly feels wrong, empty, or hostile without any visible cause. This is similar to how haunted house legends arise in abandoned buildings. The absence of explanation invites imagination to take over. Null also reflects a broader internet-era fascination with corrupted media and digital horror. Like creepypastas about haunted game cartridges or broken ROMs, Null is tied to the idea that something has gone wrong at a fundamental level of the software. The fear is not just that something scary appears, but that the game you trusted is no longer stable or safe. In many Null stories, the game does not crash immediately. Instead, it continues in a liminal, uncanny state. This prolonged malfunction is what makes the experience disturbing, because it suggests that the system is operating under rules the player no longer understands. Null, therefore, becomes a symbol of lost authorship. The player is no longer the one shaping the world. Culturally, Null never reached the same iconic status as Herobrine. However, this ambiguity allows Null to evolve endlessly within the community. One person's Null is a silent server wipe, another's is a black sky with no sun, another's is a world that loads but contains nothing but air. This flexibility makes Null more abstract and in some ways more unsettling. It adapts to whatever the player fears most about the game failing them. In this way, Null is not a legend you encounter. It is one of the more fascinating reinterpretations of Minecraft mythos, reframes Herobrine not as the primary threat, but as a warning system, an anomaly that exists to alert the player to something far worse lurking beneath the surface. In this version of the legend, Null is not merely corruption or emptiness, but an active, malignant force embedded deep within the game's structure, and Herobrine is the last recognizable symptom before everything collapses. This interpretation flips the traditional fear hierarchy on its head. The wide-eyed figure players have learned to dread is no longer the villain, but the messenger. In this story, Herobrine appears only when the world is already compromised. His behavior supports this idea. He does not attack directly, does not destroy indiscriminately, and does not speak. Instead, he watches, alters small details, leaves unnatural constructions, and then vanishes. These actions resemble diagnostics rather than malice, as if Herobrine is testing the integrity of the world or the awareness of the player. He manifests in ways that are noticeable but restrained, enough to provoke unease without causing total breakdown. The implication is that Herobrine is bound by rules that Null is not. He can only operate within the visible layer of the game, while Null exists deeper, in the code, in the spaces between loaded chunks and unresolved data. Null in this framework is not a glitch but a will. It represents a force that seeks erasure rather than control. Where Herobrine leaves signs, Null leaves absences. Worlds touched by Null become hollow. Villages spawn empty, mobs stop behaving correctly, sound cuts out, and the environment feels drained of intent. The game still runs, but it no longer feels alive. This is crucial because it suggests Null's goal is not to scare the player away, but to dissolve the meaning of the world entirely. The player is not hunted, they are ignored. And in horror, indifference is often more terrifying than aggression. The legend often describes Herobrine appearing more frequently as Null's influence grows stronger. As chunks fail, lighting breaks, or commands stop responding, sightings of Herobrine increase, as though he is attempting to draw attention to the decay. His blank white eyes take on new meaning here, not as a sign of possession or demonic nature, but as a symbol of forced perception. He sees what the player cannot, the underlying collapse of the world's logic. Herobrine's presence becomes a silent alarm, a visual artifact that something fundamental is wrong. He is not trying to harm the player. He is trying to make them notice before it is too late. In some versions of the story, Herobrine is described as a remnant of an earlier system or abandoned failsafe, perhaps a debug entity or a vestigial administrator left behind when the game evolved. He is incomplete, stuck between being an NPC and being something more. This limitation explains his cryptic behavior. He cannot speak directly, cannot explain Null, and cannot stop it. All he can do is appear, disappear, and manipulate small aspects of the environment to signal danger. His inability to fully intervene mirrors the player's own helplessness once Null takes hold, reinforcing the idea that both are trapped within the same failing structure. As Null spreads, Herobrine sightings reportedly stop. This is the most chilling part of the legend. The absence of Herobrine does not mean safety, it means failure. Once Null reaches a certain threshold, there is nothing left to warn. Worlds at this stage are described as eerily stable yet empty, with no anomalies dramatic enough to draw attention. The sky may be normal, the terrain intact, but something is fundamentally missing. This is interpreted as Null succeeding. The world still exists, but it no longer has narrative, tension, or purpose. It has become truly Null. Within this interpretation, the player's role becomes tragically ironic. Players often attempt to remove Herobrine, deleting files, restarting worlds, or installing Herobrine remover mods. In the story, this is exactly what Null wants. By eliminating the warning sign, the player accelerates their own exposure to the deeper corruption. The legend thus becomes a meta-commentary on how players react to fear. They try to erase the symptom rather than understand it. Herobrine's persistence across versions and updates in myth form reinforces this idea that warnings cannot be fully removed, only ignored. Ultimately, this reinterpretation transforms Minecraft's urban legends into a layered myth about awareness, denial, and digital decay. Herobrine is fear that can be seen and named. Null is fear that cannot be confronted because it has no shape. One watches, the other erases. One exists to be noticed, the other to make noticing meaningless. In this story, the true horror is not that something evil is watching you, but that something is patiently waiting for the world to stop mattering, and that by the time you realize it, Even the warning has already disappeared.